Good morning. Today is December 17th, and it is, let's see, what do we call the December 17th? That is the winter solstice. So we're glad you joined us this morning. Our talk today is called Embracing Wholeness, Enriching the World. And so what we mean by that is when each of us embraces our wholeness, meaning our oneness with God and all there is, that we cannot help but enrich the world with that knowledge, because it goes out, whether we can see it or not, it goes out. So we're glad that you're with us. And shall we begin with an opening prayer?
Sure.
December 17th, winter solstice. This is the day that the sun renews. From this day forward, it will be shining longer and more. So it is considered like a renewal of life from this point forward. Even though we go through some winter times, we know that the sun is shining longer and it is bringing new life. And so it's also a renewal time, or can be, for each one of us. We can choose to make it a renewal of ourselves, of our life, of our goals. And we know that we emanate with our knowledge of our oneness with God and all that is, that inclusiveness, that love, that warmth spreads out to everyone. And it is felt, and it is exactly what is needed in the world today.
So we are where we need to be. Just as the sun is increasing the amount of light that we will see, we are increasing the amount of light from within that we can experience and we can shine out. So we are now today a beacon of light, of hope, and of joy. We know this to be true, and we know that there is so much more good than there is anything else that we could possibly imagine, that we now savor the taste of that good and know that it will increase many, many times. For this we say thank you, and so it is.
So it is. So we are recording, right?
We sure are.
I wanted to start with a magnificent quote from Carolyn Mace. Carolyn Mace is a spiritual teacher. She's I'm trying to remember the first thing she called herself, a medical intuitive.
Yeah.
She was a medical intuitive, which means she could perceive what people's medical issues were and help doctors in doing so. But she now is focusing on teaching spiritual truths. And this is a quote from her book called Sacred Contracts. And she's referring to the contracts that we make as a soul before entering our life here on earth, each lifetime. So her quote is, "Our life's mission or contract cannot be defined or measured simply by our external life. Your purpose is not only your career or hobby or romantic relationship. A contract is your overall relationship to your personal power and your spiritual power. It's how you work with your energy. It's also how much you're willing to surrender to divine guidance." Your life is composed of many facets that shimmer and reflect both your physical and internal energy. Just as each fragment of a hologram contains the entire image, your mission is reflected within each of these individual energy rays.
It's really very powerful.
Yes, tell me what you think is powerful about that.
Well, the first thing that struck me when you read it, when we were sitting and having coffee this morning, was that we're not here by accident. We're not here because of anyone else. We're actually here serving a contract that we made to live this life to its absolute best. And when I think of myself as having contracted to live this life, it means I had a mission. It means I had a purpose. I had a reason for being here. And even if I don't recognize it all the time, it doesn't mean that I don't have one. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things we struggle with most often is a sense of belonging, a sense of having true value, that our lives actually do mean something and make a difference. When we recognize that we made a contract to come here, it wasn't just to serve us, it was also to serve this universe, this world, this humanity that we're a part of. And we see again and again, usually looking back, how we did serve even when we didn't know we were. And so I think the first most powerful part of that is we made a contract to live this life, and we can't renege on it. We need to see it through. We need to understand that it's a contract, not an accident. And if it's a contract also, it's more difficult to assume or to imagine that we're victims, because what happens to us may be part of what is necessary for us to fulfill the contract that we came here to fulfill. And so I would say, and someone else already said it in the book, that we are purpose driven, even if we don't know it. And the purpose that we often don't recognize we often don't recognize our purpose immediately. That doesn't mean we don't have one. And so that's the first thing that really struck me. I'm trying to think of this.
Well, I'll speak.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
What struck me is that, who we are. There's a saying that says, I think it was Emerson who said this, who you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say. And so, but what he's saying is who you are is always emanating as an energy, and it shows up in everything you do. And it doesn't even require words. And so that to me was very interesting. And I can see how it's true that in every role you ever played, whether it was as a daughter or a son or a brother or a sister or a husband or a wife or any of those roles, who you were was emanating and showing forth. And I'm sure that you did good, and you did some good in all of those roles, even being unconscious that's what you're about, and so in every job you had, and because some of us are of an age that we can look back and see many roles we played, many jobs we had, and in all of those, it's nice to think that you were giving out your spiritual energy of love and caring, whether you knew it or not.
Another thing that really, really caught my attention, it seems as if because it's a contract, it's our contract. We're here to do something. We're here to achieve something. It's our lives. We have to do it. And what she's also saying, which is really powerful, are you willing to surrender to divine guidance, which seems like the antithesis of what we're talking about.
Oh, yes.
And I've been in my own prayer work having to surrender that which I can't fix, because until I surrender it, it gets in the way of the things I can fix. It undoes me and it slows me down. And so what I have to do is to surrender to something greater, to divine mind, to divine consciousness, to Jesus, to whoever you would envision as that source of creation, that you can say, here, I can't do this alone, and I don't want to, I don't have to. And so one of the messages that she's delivering is, if you don't surrender to nothing, you surrender to something. And surrendering to something means you're not alone. And the aloneness that we feel when we feel it's our job is often the thing that gets in the way more than the job, is that what if I can't do it? What if it doesn't work out well? Well, it may not work out well, but you can surrender having to have it be perfect and having to have it work out your way to a divine way, to a greater way. And so, recently I've been working on I'm putting together, I think probably the 4th or 5th version of the same book. And you could say I've had at least 4 or 5 failures, meaning that every time I go about doing this thing, it doesn't work out. Or you could say, wow, since I've stuck with this contract that I have to create this thing, I have learned so much in those last 5 times that I've done it. And now I'm doing it again, and it's a very different experience. And it's not a different experience because I'm doing the same thing over again. It's a different experience because I can take what I didn't know, that I now know, and integrate it into what I know, and I can do more. I can do better. And so again, I'm not working alone. In this case, I'm working with a computer and a program, but I'm also working with divine mind, and then I'm saying I'm not quitting. However difficult it is, I'm going to say, you can help me with this. And what's happening, of course, is the result becomes a divine result.
Exactly. And let's talk more about that spiritual guidance. What do we mean by that? Well, if you spend time in meditation in particular, is when I've received my spiritual guidance, because in prayer, you're talking. In meditation, you're listening. In meditation, you're silencing your own talking inner voice and just listening. And so in those times, my guidance has sometimes been just a feeling, that I want to do something, but it seems like it's not logical, but I have the feeling that I should and trust it anyway. And it is risky sometimes, and it is scary, but it has always worked out. And sometimes I get a little more than just a feeling, but that's individual for each person. But it is always there for you if you know it is, and if you'll ask a question and go into the silence, and you will have an inner urging of what you should do. And what she's talking about is some of that is not what your logical ego mind would choose for you to do. It would choose for you a safer, easier route. And yet that's what you're here for. You're here to do some of the hard stuff, not just to have a life of a bowl of cherries. Those are the most rewarding things when you do the hard things.
We were watching a movie, the Burlesque. It's an older movie. I think it was around 2001. And Cher is the proprietor of a club that is going to have a hard time staying open. Now, she's desperate to keep this club open, but she's not desperate to listen. And one of the persons who she's hired says, "Do you ever listen to anybody other than your own voice?" And she stops. And when she stops and she actually listens, that's a turning point in the movie. How often do we not stop? We hear the sound of our own voice. We believe in the power of that sound. We believe in our own voice more than we believe in the listening. And the listening is so critical. Speak as loud as you want and speak any way you want to, but also be willing to listen.
Indeed. And so it's just encouraging to know that all of your spiritual practice, your time in prayer and meditation and doing good works, all of that is part of you sharing your energy, your spiritual energy, your love, your caring, and just being there for people at certain times. And so just know that without even trying, you've been doing the right thing by doing that.
What she says here, which I really like too, is your life is composed of many facets that shimmer and reflect both your physical and internal energy. Mm-hmm. Now, why that's also important is that you may be saying one thing, but the energy of your body and the energy of the commitment that you've made may speak louder in the direction that you want to go to. It eventually all works together, but you want to listen to the physical part of you, the emotional part of you, what you're saying, and what the universe around you is saying. Because when she's talking about reflects both the physical and internal energy, if you look carefully, you can see how that's working in this world that you're in and what you need to do and how you need to do it. And when you get stuck, turn it over. Say, I'm released this and I don't have another way. I'm reminded of, I think it was Emerson who did this, or no, it was,
when we say Emerson, we mean Ralph Waldo Emerson.
No, who invented the light bulb, Thomas Edison. Mm-hmm. Thomas Edison worked forever on, this is the story I've heard anyway, worked forever on creating the filament for a bulb that wouldn't burn out within 5 minutes. And he worked on it and he worked on it. And a couple of things that were really important, he didn't have 5,000 failures. He found 5,000 things that didn't work. That was important. But what else he did is he sat in a chair with a bucket next to him and a handful of ball bearings. And then he would take a nap. And when he would fall asleep, after a while, his hand would release the ball bearings and the ball bearings would drop and make a noise and wake him up. And he would wake up to whatever he was dreaming, which in most cases was another possibility for a filament. And he actually, from what I hear, dreamed the filament that would work. Why that's important is when you give your brain or you give your mind an assignment, it will work on it. Now, what if the assignment is finding out what's wrong in the world? It will work on it 24 hours a day. If the assignment you give in your mind or your brain is find divinity everywhere, find love and consciousness everywhere, find joy everywhere, the brain will say, okay, we can do that. Sure. Let's look for it.
See, I would call that spiritual guidance too, because that part of our mind, we call it the unconscious or subconscious, that part is always receptive to and often hearing and knowing what is coming from your higher self. And it's always trying to help you.
Yeah. We forget that. We forget that we're working with dimensions of our own being, and we're also working with dimensional beings and multidimensional beings. And so if you can imagine that you're walking in one direction, and to your left and to your right are guides, and to your behind you, taller than you, is another spiritual entity or teacher. And if you look back, you would say, "Oh my goodness, this is a whole fortress." Yes, you're not alone. And it's really helpful to think in those terms, because all of those spirits or guides or teachers or whatever you want to call them also have information and have a different vision, or have a greater vision than possibly you have, and you can borrow that. You can borrow from the unconscious, you can borrow from the superconscious, you can borrow from the greater conscious.
So I find since I read that quote, that I find all the mundane things I do, going around solve this problem or that problem, and suddenly I feel like I have a large force of energy and power with me.
Yeah.
When I think about all those rays radiating, that it's all there, and all of your spiritual growth and awareness is helping you and helping the earth, helping our planet.
So one other thing I want to say about this, we're talking about guidance and divinity and supernatural and all kinds of wonderful things that are there as a part of your life, and you may every hour or two forget all of that.
That's true.
And so that you forget all of that, or that you are reduced to your worst fear and fear reaction, does not mean you can't stop and set the reset and say, I'm a spiritual being having a physical experience. It doesn't mean that you're stuck in it. So what I expect, because I'm in this world, is that very often this world will preoccupy me to the point where I will forget there's any other world. And that's okay. Allow yourself to do that. Why I say that too is I've talked to a lot of people who say, I'm not very spiritual. Do you believe there's anything greater than you? Oh, yes. Do you believe in what we would call divine mind? Oh, well, yeah, I believe that. So what's wrong? Well, I don't think I'm connected to it, or I don't feel it, or, it's hard for me to get in touch with. Okay, that doesn't mean it's not there. And so however far off the path you get, or however far off the road you can get back on it. And don't beat yourself up for not having done it or not doing it well. It takes practice. And also, when your life is going really well and smoothly and comfortably and easily, it's a lot easier to be thoughtful and spiritual. It's harder when you're in trouble, or things are having gone against you, so it seems, or when you have obstacles to overcome.
Well, but what I like about her quote is that even in those times when you're not feeling it, it's emanating from you anyway.
It's feeling you.
All of the all the work you've done, in not just this lifetime, but past lifetimes. Because when you meet certain people, even when they're young children, this is an old soul. They're wise beyond their years, and so it's not even just this lifetime, in my opinion, that this growth and wisdom, it grows for many lifetimes. And so just know you've got it, and it's working for you, because sometimes it can be overwhelming when we think of the problems in our world today, because they are many.
Yeah.
And they are profound, and you can feel like, well, what can I do to help? I can't fix these problems. No, you probably can't fix all the problems of the world, but you can be you can be the loving energy and know it's emanating from you, whether you're rescuing kittens or you're helping a friend, or a loved one.
Or you're not reacting to something that could cause you harm or someone else harm, but by using your senses and by using your consciousness. Short story. And the reason I'm sharing this story is because what you creates a field for you that very often will help you when you lose track. I was the program director for an inpatient hospital-based program for eating disorders. And I had to meet with the administrator on a regular basis, the hospital administrator, who was the decision maker as to whether we would even exist. And he said to me, Bob, you're either going to have to increase your senses, or we're going to have to decrease the staff you have.
Senses means
numbers of clients that you have, or we're going to have to close you down. And I thought, I've got a dozen people now that work for me that have jobs and have families. I said, so what am I supposed to do? He said, well, you're going to have to admit some people who are marginal or who probably don't need to be admitted in order to keep the numbers up. And I was actually walking back to my office thinking, I don't want to do this, but I don't want 12 people to lose their jobs. The intake worker that is the one responsible for bringing people in came to me. She said, "You're going to be so happy with me." And I said, "What?" She said, "Well, you know how you told me to only admit people that were appropriate? I had 3 people today that weren't appropriate, and I did not admit them. And I feel so proud because you taught me that integrity means everything." And at that point, I didn't know whether to cry or whether just to go home. And I said, "That's amazing, and it's wonderful, and I'm proud of you." Then 2 hours later, she admitted 2 people that were appropriate. Another hour later, she admitted another person was appropriate. The next day, I saw the hospital administrator. He said, "I guess that talk really helped, didn't it?" But what I'm sharing with you is, in a heartbeat, I was willing to give up my integrity for some sort of better reason. Like I don't want to do this. It's not appropriate, but I don't want anybody to go home and be fired. So what you send out can have a life of its own and will often come back and support you and will help you, which is really, really important. So short story, it worked.
That's a great example. Great example.
The other thing that really strikes me too is thoughts. I didn't ever think of it this way. I have a book called The Diary of a Mindful Dog, and it's been published now. I think it's been a couple of years since it's been published. But what I realized, it is thought in paperback form, and it's gone out all over the world, and it has its own experience, and it comes back to me. And we go places, and people who I don't know say, "Oh, you're the one who wrote that." Imagine that your thoughts are like that, and you meet somebody, "Oh, I didn't realize that was you. I've had that thought too." And we share a lot, and our thoughts do go out into the universe. They do go out into the world. They do manifest.
Well, they do more than that. They gush. "Oh, you're Murphy's dad?"
Yeah, well,
Oh,
I love you. And you're not quite, you can take me to breakfast.
Yeah.
But it is amazing that our thoughts are like that, though. They go out and they have a life, and they come back to us in many different forms in many different people. And so, we really want to think about our thinking. And if we can, imagine the world working for us, and that the world is in favor of us, and that we're in favor of us. And when we do that, the universe simply acts more favorably. It has no choice.
It does. And I think it's just a good reminder, a good reminder. As Bob said, you're never alone. You have lots of helpers. Learn to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Learn to ask questions and listen. I learned early on in meditation because I was in a class where we had this assignment, which is, meditate and maybe ask a question and then have a pen and paper handy in case you get an impression or even an answer that you hear, and write it down.
Mm-hmm.
Because often there's really help there for you, and having pencil and pen and paper handy seems to encourage getting a response.
It's interesting too how it doesn't always apply, but how differently we see things depending on our gender too. I grew up with men have hunches, women have intuition. But it's the same thing. I have this hunch. It's like mine. I created it. A woman, I don't know where it came from. It's external. But the bottom line is, you make room for something greater than you, and something greater in you comes through you and can shine and can help you and can guide you. There's been a lot of times in my life where I had been guided, and I've only learned that I was guided in retrospect. When I look back and think, "Oh my goodness!" And I'm sure that's true for people that didn't get on the airplane that crashed, or didn't make a mistake in an area that they didn't realize it was a mistake. And but they were guided. They had this hunch they shouldn't do it, or intuition, and it saved their lives. I believe for me, I'm here for a reason, because there's been a couple of occasions where if I hadn't listened to Spirit and Spirit hadn't spoken to me, I wouldn't be here.
And those who were in that accident, according to a wise man who told me when I was new to spirituality, a plane crashed and everybody died. And I was just, "Oh, isn't that awful? That's so sad." And he said, all those people agreed to that before it happened, and they were gone before it hit the ground. In other words, their souls had left their body. So he said it really isn't a tragedy, although it certainly seems to be one. And I think he was right. I think he was right, because from everything that I learned, no matter how tragic or traumatic a death is, whether it's by war or whatever, I don't think the soul experiences that. It's left before the body.
Well, and
is
when you
hurt.
look at the near-death experiences that people have reported, the most common thing happens is that they'll stand outside of their body watching people trying to rescue
Right.
them, trying to save them.
Right.
Why are you working so hard? Oh my goodness, that's me. And
Or like Danny and Brinkley said, I thought I was better looking than that.
yeah, because he's being taken to the ambulance after having been hit with 187,000 volts of electricity. You don't look good after that, you know. But we have hundreds of cases where people's near-death experience teaches us something about what happens when we reach that point of death. We step out, we look at it and say, wow, this is interesting. And it's painful to those who are involved physically because life wants to take care of itself. It's what it does. But for those that know more, you can stand outside of it. There was a series on TV that used to do that all the time on HBO. It was Dead Like Me. Which is really very good. In every single chapter, somebody died or several people would die, and the first thing you see them is they pop out of their body, and they go, "Whoa, that's interesting." And actually, although it was a fictional creation, it was based on some real good research that this is actually what happens, and again and again and again. Well, I think we've about used up our time. We don't have the slide on this computer that we have on the other computer. So what we're going to do is spend just a minute and say if there's any way that if you're moved by what we do or you like what you feel and experience here with us, then we'd like to invite you to go to our website, which is
CSL, which stands for Center for Spiritual Living. So it's CSL palmbeaches.org.
And there's a place on that menu that you can scroll down that says donate.
No, scroll up to the
Scroll
top.
up to the top, yes.
Ways to donate.
And you can donate as much as you want or as little as you want. And we'll say, and do say right now, thank you for your giving, for your willingness to share your good with us as we share our good with you.
Indeed. And we thank you. We know that as you give, you do receive. It's important to remember this time, or it's time of gift giving anyway, but it is the time. And that's why the end of the year is often a time for people to reflect and say, what do I want to do for my charitable giving for the year?
It reminds me, you all may see this. I think it was on CBS, but it was really, it was wonderful no matter where it was, but I saw it on CBS, I think. Kids have a harder time developing empathy because their brain isn't fully developed. And they say empathy is something you develop probably more like 19, 20, 21 or in that range. Until then, empathy is really not such a thing for kids as it is I don't want to get caught, I don't want to get punished.
It's all about me.
Yeah, it's really
that.
So what this person has been giving away money every Christmas gave, I think it's like 25 children $100 bills and said, give these to people who you think need them. And they did. And I was so moved by one little girl who's probably 8 or 9 and or 10 maybe, I don't know, but young. And the reporter was saying, what was that like? And she said, I've never experienced anything like this in my life. She said, it's just changed my life.
It was the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, it's the best feeling in the world. So really interesting. Giving can be the best feeling in the world. And you receive when you give lovingly and kindly. Now these kids were giving away $100. It wasn't out of their budget. It wasn't out of their piggy bank. But that giving, unattached to anything else, meant so much to them. So anyway, give to where you get your spiritual good. Give to what supports and encourages you. We give to PBS. We give to things that make a difference for us in our lives, because in consciousness, what we're saying is, I want this to thrive. I want this to do better. We wish you well this next week and know that you will absolutely have the most amazing week that is possible.
Oh, yes. And I do want to remind people, well, I'll do it afterwards.
Okay. Yeah, for those of you who hang out, we have other messages for you. So we're gonna end this part and stop recording.